A few weeks back I made a video in which I made a set of 3 brand new engines by randomly picking a pair of Thomas characters and merging them together. The results were a bit wacky to say the least. I still have nightmares about Stanif. There are so many Thomas characters to try this out on, so today I thought I'd give it another go. I've got my drawing pad at the ready, so it's time I made a start. I've made some changes to the wheel since last time. I've removed the characters that were used for the first video, and each time I roll a character they'll be removed to avoid repetition. I've also added the miniature engines, Railway Series only characters, road vehicles and some rolling stock, although spoilers, none of them get picked in today's video. The first engine will be a combination of Lexi and Winston. Well, that character combo certainly didn't disappoint. A cab-forward locomotive meets an inspection car. My first thought was to have a car on rails with a face on the back. Given that Lexi is an American design, I figured that it would be worth taking inspiration from American inspection vehicles. What I found out was that whereas Winston was specifically built as a rail vehicle despite looking like a car, a lot of American inspection vehicles were just cars modified to run on rails. This led to me referencing old American station wagons when designing this weird hybrid vehicle. I mainly picked a station wagon because of their asymmetry. They have a long bonnet or hood at the front, but a relatively flat back. For this drawing I wanted to have another engine appear alongside this backwards car, who shall henceforth be known as Lexton, so I decided to add James to the picture. He appears to be just as confused as we are. Sir, with all due respect, what the f*** is that thing? I'm glad you asked, James, replied the Fat Controller. This is my new inspection vehicle. I'll be using it to keep an eye on the railway, so you'd better get used to seeing it. I think I'm going to have to start pulling trains with my eyes closed, James muttered to himself. Like I said in the previous video on this subject, these hybrid characters are being made just for fun and not serious additions to the lore I've been steadily building in other videos of mine. But that doesn't mean I still can't make a backstory anyway. Lexton is primarily based on American designs, so how did they get to Sodor? Well, one character who we know has travelled the world is Sir Robert Norramby, the Earl of Sodor. Perhaps he visited the USA and found an old rail inspection vehicle that was due to be withdrawn. He purchased Lexton and used them to travel down disused lines where the rails were still intact. He then took Lexton with him for the remainder of his journey round the world, and then took them back to Sodor. Meanwhile, the Fat Controller needed a new inspection vehicle because Winston was away for an overhaul. The Earl was more than happy to let the Fat Controller borrow Lexton in the meantime. And so, here is the completed picture. The next engine will be a mixture of Class 40 and Salty. I guess that's a bit more normal, combining 2 diesel engines. My initial thought when getting these 2 engines is that I could call the combined character Class Faulty. So I've already got a character trait, he's faulty. But then I thought for a moment, a character that looks like a mixture between Salty and Class 40, and he's faulty. That's just Derek. So, my objective here is to have this character not end up just looking or behaving like Derek. The obvious thing to do was to make this character Salty's maroon colour rather than the dark green of Class 40 and Derek. I've also given him some of Salty's details, such as his exhaust vent, brim and teeth, although his actual face structure is closer to that of Class 40. I've also combined Salty and Class 40's wheel arrangements to make him a 464, which is pretty unusual for a diesel. To be honest, I'm not even sure if I've seen a mainline diesel with side rods. Early mainline electric locomotives sometimes have them, but the only diesel engines with side rods I can think of are shunters. Let me know if I'm wrong. So we know this hybrid engine is faulty, but what's his deal besides that? Well, I was thinking that Class 40 may have been loaned to the North Western Railway to help Henry with flying kipper duties. Since Class 40 is an express engine, and Salty is a dockside shunter, an express fish train seems like a logical middle ground. Drawing an engine pulling the flying kipper also gave me an excuse to draw an engine at a different time of day, in this case early morning before the sun has risen. Class 40 is quite a boastful engine when it comes to Sodor. He scoffs at the idea of an important train like the Flying Kipper being left in the buffers of an old, clapped-out steam engine like Henry. His words, not mine. Henry points out that he's not as old and clapped out as he used to be since he's had a rebuild, but Class 40 doesn't listen. He sets off with the Flying Kipper and all seems to be going smoothly until his engine starts to splutter. He's overheated, and he can't pull the train anymore. So, not for the first time, Henry has to rescue a failed diesel. Class 40 expects Henry to gloat, but Henry just tells him that when he's not feeling well, he makes it known and doesn't try to cover it up by putting others down. Class 40 says nothing for the rest of the journey, but Henry is pretty sure that he's learnt his lesson. With all that said, here is the finished illustration. The final engine for today will be combining Porter with Peter Sam. That's probably even more normal than the last drawing, just an American narrow gauge engine really. I've always liked Peter Sam as a character, but Porter never really did anything for me. He's kinda like Scruff, in that his character is a bit nothingy. I think the general opinion on Porter has swayed a little over the years. It may be weird to think now, but I seem to remember that when Season 17 was just coming out, people were saying that Porter was a great character. I suppose we'd just come off the heels of the Nitrogen era, where many of the newly introduced characters were either annoying, gimmicky, or both, so even a relatively generic character felt like a breath of fresh air. I guess there's also the fact that Porter is based on the same type of engine as Strasbourg Thomas. Maybe in a future iteration of Thomas we'll get an engine based on a Japanese Railway C11, or a Hudswell Clark shunter. Make it happen, Mattel. I suppose there isn't a massive amount to talk about here, since both Porter and Peter Sam are both green saddle tank engines of a fairly conventional design, so the resulting engine is fairly standard. I looked into narrow gauge Porter locomotives as a point of reference. The saddle tank and cab details are mostly taken from Porter, but the smokebox and of course the funnel were lifted from Peter Sam. Same goes for the 042 wheel arrangement. There are narrow gauge Porter locomotives with this reel arrangement which look pretty cool, if I may say so myself. Maybe I'll find an excuse to draw one of these in a future video. I've kept Porter's 3 domes, with the sand domes being based on the design for Peter Sam's dome. Porter Sam's face I'd say is closer to Porter than Peter Sam, particularly his chin. In terms of personality and backstory for Porter Sam, I suppose I could combine the 2 engines' personalities. The main thing I remember about Porter's personality is that he doesn't let criticism get to him. It's just water off a duck's back, as he says. I suppose Peter Sam doesn't let negativity get to him too much either. It's not as if Sir Handel's constant complaining stops him from being happy and excitable. One thing to point out is that Peter Sam is a very expressive and emotional character. He's not happy 24/7. He's genuinely heartbroken when he thinks the Skarloey Railway is going to be sold, and is horrified when Duck tells him that all the dukes were scrapped. Perhaps Porter Sam can differ in that when he happens upon bad news or misfortune, he just grins and bears it. Had a massive crash that sent him off the rails? Ah well. His railway's about to close? Could be worse. Maybe he gets a reputation for being a positive character who doesn't get upset, but because he doesn't allow himself to emote like Peter Sam does, he's actually a lot more stressed and unhappy than he'd have you believe. With that said and done, here is the finished drawing. And so, there was another set of new characters made by combining pre-existing Thomas characters. These ones were perhaps not as mental as the ones from the previous video, but it did bring about a new challenge in the form of making them distinct from the engines they were derived from. So this video was still very interesting to make, but with all that said, it's time for me to start work on the next video, so I'll see you then.